All right, Lenny. So, first of all, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And so, what was the music scene like when you first started playing around Berkeley?
For me,
Yeah.
um, there weren't a lot of opportunities for, you know, young players, but there was an active rhythm and blues scene there, and there was, the middle of the '60s. There was the San Francisco rock scene, and there were a lot of bars. We played on the street, we played in the bars.
What instruments were you playing back then?
Started on clarinet, and I picked up the saxophone when I was like 13. And started working when I was 14.
So, what were those street bands like? What kind of instrumentation or?
Small band, bass, washboard, guitar.
Washboard.
Yeah, harmonica, clarinet. It's sort of like a skiffle band.
And did you have you had some teachers back then who sort of shaped you, or?
A few people that I, interacted with, people I came in contact with. Bert Wilson was a neighbor of mine. My mother's second husband was Tommy Warren's a jazz trumpet player. I ran into people around town. I learned from other musicians mostly.
So how did you get from playing street gigs and parties and stuff like that to playing in Tower of Power at 18 years old? What's the story behind that?
Met those guys a few times. Once through Bert Wilson, he was acquaintance of theirs. It's a small scene in the Bay Area. And my band, one of the bar bands I was playing in, started opening for them sometimes in local bars. And they met me through that, and I started going over to their house and hanging out before I played with them. When I was like 16 or 17, I started hanging at their house. Then when they let their other saxophone player go, they hired me. They rehearsed just a few blocks from where I lived. So I used to go to their rehearsals and hang out and watch them rehearse. They were used to seeing me around, so they just got me in the band. I was the youngest guy in the band, but they knew me from the bars and from sitting in with them, things like that.
Got it. So that's a pretty big time first gig. I mean, you probably went on tour right away.
Yeah, instantly. It was in the Bay Area. It was like being part of the Beatles or something. We've had those gas wars, and they would close at night when the gas stations were closed. They'd let us fill up our tanks, so we wouldn't have to wait in line. I would go to the bank with my paycheck, and the bank manager would personally cash it for me. I didn't have to go to the tellers. And it was like being a superstar in the Bay Area. We were huge. I mean, other parts of the world we weren't, but right there we were giant.
You're big in Europe as well.
We had some action in Europe. Most of our they're bigger over there now, but most of our fan base was West Coast. We had a very big Hispanic, Chicano, audience, and we played up and down the coast quite a bit. And we traveled the rest of the country. We had pockets, little areas where we were very popular, little parts of Connecticut and parts of Chicago area, where people liked us. So. But we were big enough to do national tours, 200 or 300 days a year. So.
And 10 years of touring is a whole lot of touring.
It's a lot of touring. It was more like about 9 years, but it was quite a lot.
And I mean, it's a lot of the same music too. After a while, it must get sort of, obviously, but it opened up a lot of doors for you too.
I enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun. Very exuberant performance experience. The guys were, it was like my family. They substituted for my family and for school and for a lot of other things. They became like, what most people are doing when they're in college, getting their bachelor's and their graduate degrees. I was on the road with Tower of Power. I was from when I was 18 till I was 26, so it was a pretty educational experience for me. I learned a lot about the world, a lot about performing and how to do music in front of people, and how to do work in the recording studio. It was all very practical knowledge, and you're right. It got to be. There was a point where it's a little hard to do the same songs, night after night after night, but. It's part of whenever you have a hit. That's sort of the curse that comes along with a hit. You have to repeat it. So.
And it sort of exposed you also to playing with some of the heavyweights that you play with later in your career, like Elton John. I think the Tower of Power horn section play with Elton John. Is that right?
We did a lot of like studio work with name acts at the time. We played with Elton. We played with Rod Stewart. And we played with Hart. A lot of different acts that would hire the horn section to be either to play live with them or to play on their records, and you know, met the celebrities of the moment. Certainly doing that. Played with Jose Feliciano. Played lots of, you know, sort of interesting acts. Played with the Meters. Played with you know, a whole variety of different kinds of music. Pretty much the, you know, a broad spectrum of music from the times.
And during that time, especially, I guess all throughout Tower of Power, you were on some interesting records like the ones with Little Feat, like Waiting for Columbus or the self-titled debut.
We did that.
And what was it like playing with Lowell George, for example, or guys like that?
He was great. He was an amazing musician. There's this one moment on the Waiting for Columbus record on the song Mercenary Territory where we sort of converge and I'm playing a really high note and he's playing the bottleneck thing and he sort of comes off my note. And he was like a very intuitive musician, really gifted, wonderful musician.
And I read that after Tower of Power, you used to play in the kitchen a lot.
I did some downtown scene work here. You know, I did like the, you know, I participated with a lot of the, you know, downtown New York scene. Writing music, I had a group, the Borneo Horns, that played those kind of gigs, and then I played with Peter Gordon and people like that. My wife was a modern dancer, so I had this introduction to that whole scene of you know, improvised music and modern dance and you know, more sort of art world kind of reality.
So also around that time you toured with David Bowie.
I did a year with David Bowie. I did the Serious Moonlight tour.
And Paul Simon.
I did a little bit of live playing with Paul Simon, a few, you know, little ins and outs, you know, gigs with him. I played on Diamonds on the Soles of Your Shoes on his Graceland record. So I have, you know, I've known him for quite a while. He's a friend of Warren Michaels at Saturday Night Live, so there's opportunities to connect through that too.
And also, I mean, over the years, some interesting records. Like I read that you were on Passages with Ravi Shankar and Philip Glass.
Oh boy! Well, I remember the session. It was at Looking Glass Studios with Philip Glass, but you know the context at the moment I wasn't sure of because it was just me playing. It was, but I knew Philip from. I actually lived in a building that Philip was in, but I knew him also through my wife, who danced with a company that was associated with Robert Wilson that did the. She was my wife was Kathy Ray, and she was one of the dancers with the Andy DeGroat company, who did the original dances with the Art on the Beach piece, you know, the Einstein on the Beach piece that Robert Wilson and Phil Glass collaborated on. So I met those people through that part of, you know, that scene as well.
But to be on such diverse records, it seems like, I mean, it's a real testament to your versatility or your ability to adapt. And
I think it's just a testament to, you know, not dying when I was 30. I mean, you know, you just keep live. The more you live, the more stuff happens to you. If you just say yes to everything that people ask you, then you're bound to do a lot of different things. And I've always thought, you know, one of my philosophies is just agree to everything, you know, unless you can't because you're booked doing something else, you know. So you end up doing a lot of different projects that way. You find it more interesting adventures if you just are open to, you know, possibilities.